She walked back into Graceland quietly, holding a small velvet box that hadn't been opened in years. Inside was the ring Elvis once slipped onto her finger. The same ring she tried to give back when their love fell apart. But this time, when she placed it in his hand, what he whispered made her burst into tears. Las Vegas Hilton, November 14, 1976. Nearly 20,000 people held their breath as Elvis Presley stepped onto the stage. The spotlight hit the white rhinestone suit, catching on the sweat at his collar. He smiled, but behind that smile, something in his eyes had gone quiet. The band began, "Can't Help Falling in Love." The crowd erupted, a tidal wave of sound that rolled across the room. Yet to Elvis, it all sounded distant, like applause underwater. He sang, but his heart wasn't there. Somewhere in the dark, he still saw her. Back at Graceland, a single lamp burned in his bedroom. On the dresser sat a framed photo. Priscilla, smiling softly beside a young Lisa Marie. That photo never moved. Neither did the ring box next to it, the same one he'd given her nearly a decade earlier. Elvis stared at that photo every night before leaving for another show. The fame that once felt like fire now felt like fog. There were fans at the gate 24 hours a day, calling his name. But none of them could say it the way she used to. He poured himself a glass of water, then set it down untouched. The air conditioner hummed. A clock ticked somewhere. The mansion felt like a museum built around one living man. His friend and bodyguard, Charlie Hodge, walked in quietly. "You ready for tomorrow, E?" he asked. Elvis didn't answer right away. He just looked out the window at the lights of Memphis, tiny sparks flickering through the rain. "Charlie," he finally said, "you ever wish you could go back to the night before you made your first mistake?" Charlie smiled faintly, unsure what to say. "You got no mistakes, E. Just songs." But Elvis shook his head. "Songs don't keep you warm." The two men sat in silence. Somewhere outside, thunder rolled across the Tennessee sky. Elvis thought of that night in 1967, when he'd slid the ring onto Priscilla's finger and promised her forever. Forever had lasted 6 years. He closed his eyes and tried to remember her voice. Not from interviews, not from the way the press painted their love story, but the way she sounded when she whispered his name backstage before he went on. It was that sound that steadied him before every show. He reached for the ring box, felt heavier than he remembered. Inside was the same 3.5-carat diamond that had once caught the reflection of flashbulbs on their wedding day. The diamond hadn't changed, only they had. He wondered if she still had the other one, the gold band he'd refused to take back during their divorce. "Keep it," he'd told her. "Maybe one day it'll mean something again." Now, years later, he couldn't explain why he'd said that. Maybe part of him hoped she'd understand something he couldn't say out loud, that some loves aren't meant to end, only to rest. A soft knock broke his thoughts. The door creaked open, and his maid, Mary Jenkins, peeked in. "Mr. Presley," Miss Priscilla called. "She said she'll be in Memphis next week. She asked if you'd be home." Elvis didn't move. The thunder outside paused for a beat, as if waiting. Then he said quietly, "Tell her." "Yeah, tell her I'll be here." Mary nodded and left. Elvis stayed seated, eyes still on the window. The rain started again, heavier this time, washing the city lights into golden streaks. He took a deep breath and whispered to himself, "Maybe forever's not over yet. What do you do when the one who left might be the only one who can save you?" Graceland, May 1, 1967. The morning sun slipped through lace curtains and scattered across the floor like gold dust. Elvis stood in front of the mirror, nervous in a way the world had never seen. Outside, fans gathered along the white gates, holding flowers and homemade signs that said, "Forever, Elvis Priscilla." He wasn't just a king that day, he was a man in love. The ring had been custom-made by a jeweler in Beverly Hills. 3.5 carats of pure diamond set in platinum, surrounded by smaller stones that caught the light like fire. But for Elvis, it wasn't the price that mattered. It was what it stood for, normal life, something he'd forgotten the shape of. "Are you sure about this, E?" his friend Joe Esposito asked quietly. Elvis smiled. slipping the ring into his pocket. "When I look at her, Joe." "Yeah, I'm sure." That afternoon, in a small suite at the Aladdin Hotel in Las Vegas, they said I do. Only 14 guests were there. The press was waiting outside, but inside it felt like time stopped. Priscilla wore a white beaded gown, long lashes trembling as she held his hand. Elvis's voice shook when he said her name. Flashbulbs exploded the moment they stepped out. Cameras caught every smile, every kiss, every promise. The world saw perfection, but what they didn't see was how fragile that perfection was. That night, back at Graceland, the newlyweds danced alone in the living room. The jukebox hummed softly, playing "Can't Help Falling in Love." Elvis whispered, "One day, when the music stops, promise me you'll still be here." Priscilla smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. "Always." But promises made under music don't always survive the silence. By 1970, the tours had taken over their lives. Elvis was in Vegas one night, New York the next. His schedule was built by others. His heart pulled in every direction except home. Letters from Priscilla grew shorter. Sometimes she'd write, "I miss who we were." Other times, she wouldn't write at all. Still, every time he came back to Graceland, she was there at the door, smiling, pretending the distance didn't hurt. But behind her eyes, he saw it. A quiet ache, the kind that love alone can't heal. There's a strange truth about fame. It gives you everything except time. One night, as Elvis packed for another tour, Priscilla sat on the bed watching him. "Do you ever get tired?" she asked softly. He stopped folding his jumpsuit. "Of what?" "Of being him, the man everyone wants." He didn't answer. Instead, he looked at the ring still on her finger. It glowed under the lamplight like it was alive. That ring became their symbol and their curse. Every fight, every apology seemed to circle back to it. "You gave me forever," she once said. But forever only lasts between shows. Fans still believed in their fairy tale, but inside Graceland, walls were cracking. The press would call it a dream marriage, but those who lived inside knew better. In a diary that surfaced years later, a maid named Maria wrote, "Sometimes, I'd find Miss Priscilla sitting in the kitchen after midnight, turning that ring in her hand. She never took it off, not even when she cried." Love, once so loud, had gone quiet. As 1972 approached, the ring started to feel heavier on her finger. It wasn't just a symbol anymore. It was a memory that wouldn't let go. Elvis noticed. He always did. But he didn't know how to fix something he couldn't see. Sometimes love doesn't die. It just runs out of places to hide. And that's exactly what was about to happen next. Santa Monica Courthouse, October 9th, 1973. Outside, cameras flashed like lightning. Reporters shouted questions. But inside, the sound was silence. Elvis Presley sat at a wooden table, his head down, sunglasses hiding eyes that looked more tired than famous. Across from him, Priscilla adjusted her coat. She wasn't a movie star today, just a woman trying to end something the world thought would last forever. The judge read through the final papers. "Irreconcilable differences," the clerk said softly. Elvis didn't look up. The words felt like static, distant, cold, unreal. Only when the gavel hit the desk did he move. He turned his head, just slightly, toward her. Their eyes met for half a second. In that tiny moment, 1,000 memories passed between them. Wedding bells, laughter, midnight dances, and whispered promises that had all faded into echoes. After the hearing, they stepped outside. Reporters swarmed. Microphones, cameras, flashing bulbs. Priscilla forced a polite smile. Elvis didn't speak at all. He just walked beside her to the car. But before the driver closed the door, she said softly, "Elvis, wait." He turned. And there it was, the ring. The same one he'd given her 6 years before. She held it in her hand, trembling slightly. "I think this belongs to you," she said. He stared at it. For a moment, the noise around them disappeared. Then he shook his head. "Keep it." "Why?" she whispered. Elvis took a slow breath. "Because someday, it might find its way home." Then he got in the car, the door shut, and the king was gone. That single sentence would haunt them both. Back at Graceland, the staff said he barely spoke for days. He played gospel records late into the night, his voice faintly humming along. Sometimes, he'd stop mid-song and stare at the wall, lost somewhere between memory and regret. Charlie Hodge later recalled, "He wasn't angry, he was just empty, like someone had turned off the light inside him." Meanwhile, Priscilla moved into her new home in Los Angeles. She tried to start fresh, building a life beyond the shadow of the king. But every time she opened her jewelry box, the ring stared back. She couldn't throw it away. She couldn't wear it either. So, she kept it hidden, wrapped in a small handkerchief, locked in the top drawer of her dresser. Years passed, but neither of them truly moved on. They called each other sometimes, mostly about Lisa Marie. The conversations were polite, careful, but under every word lived an ache too deep to say out loud. "Are you okay?" she asked him once over the phone. He paused for a long time. "I'm still singing," he said. "That's something, right? That's the thing about heartbreak. It doesn't always scream. Sometimes, it just hums quietly in the background of your life." By 1976, Elvis's health was fading. Late nights, heavy touring, loneliness. It all added up. The man who once moved the world with a smile now struggled to move himself out of bed. Still, he'd sometimes look toward the dresser, where that empty ring box sat. He'd touch it gently, like it was alive. Some say love ends with words, but theirs never really ended. It just paused in silence, waiting for a return neither of them believed would come. Until one day it did. Because love, even broken, sometimes circles back. Graceland, November 1976. The gates were quiet that morning. No fans, no reporters, no flashbulbs. Only the wind moving through the trees and the slow sound of tires on gravel. A black car stopped outside the mansion. The door opened and Priscilla stepped out. She hadn't been here in years. The air smelled the same, faintly of cedar, leather, and memory. In her purse, wrapped in a folded white handkerchief, was the ring. Mary Jenkins, Elvis's longtime maid, opened the front door. "Miss Priscilla, I didn't think I'd see you again." Priscilla smiled softly. "Neither did I." Inside, the house looked frozen in time. Photos of Elvis and Lisa Marie lined the hallway. A jumpsuit hung near the stairway, sequins still catching the light. Somewhere, faint music played, an old gospel tune, "You'll Never Walk Alone." "Elvis is upstairs," Mary said quietly. "He's not been feeling too well lately." As Priscilla climbed the stairs, her heart pounded. Each step felt heavier than the last. The last time she'd stood there, they'd said goodbye. Now, she was walking toward something she didn't even have a name for. She knocked lightly on the door. "Come in," came a familiar voice, weaker now, but unmistakable. Elvis was sitting by the window in his robe, a cup of coffee untouched beside him. He looked older, softer around the edges, his hair thinner, his eyes more fragile. But when he saw her, he smiled, and for a second time folded back. "Priscilla?" "Hey," she whispered, stepping inside. He motioned for her to sit. The air between them was thick, filled with years of silence. "I didn't think you'd ever come back," he said. She nodded. "I almost didn't." He looked down at his hands, fidgeting with a guitar pick. "You still wearing it?" She hesitated. "No," she said softly. "That's why I came." Elvis turned, confused. She opened her purse, slowly unwrapping the white handkerchief. The ring gleamed in the dim light, exactly as it had the day he gave it to her. "I've held on to this for too long," she said. "It's not mine anymore." For a moment Elvis didn't speak. His eyes locked on the ring, his breathing uneven. Then, quietly, he said, "You shouldn't have come all this way just to give me back a piece of the past." "It's not the past," she replied. "It's us. I think it still deserves to be home." The room fell silent. The only sound was the faint hum of the air conditioner. Priscilla reached out, holding out her hand. "Please, Elvis." He reached forward slowly, his fingers brushing hers. The diamond caught the sunlight, one tiny flash, like a spark of everything they once were. He held the ring in his palm, studying it like it was something alive. Mary Jenkins would later tell friends. He went pale when she handed it to him, like every memory in his body came rushing back at once. Finally he spoke, voice trembling. "Do you know what this is?" he asked. Priscilla smiled faintly. "A reminder." Elvis shook his head. "No, it's proof." "Proof of what?" she whispered. "That I once had something real." He stood, slowly, and walked to the dresser. Setting the ring beside the photo of their wedding day, he said, "Now it's back where it belongs." They both stared at it in silence. The same silence that once ended them now felt like peace. "I never stopped wishing you'd walk through that door again," he said. She smiled sadly. "And I never stopped wondering if you'd still want me here." The room went still. Outside, the rain began to fall, soft, rhythmic, like applause in the distance. He turned toward her, voice soft but clear. "Thank you for bringing it home." And then, almost to himself, he whispered something she'd never forget. But those words didn't sound like goodbye. They sounded like the start of forgiveness. The room had gone quiet. Outside, the Memphis rain tapped gently against the glass, filling the silence with rhythm. Elvis still held the ring in his hand, his fingers trembling as if afraid it might disappear. Priscilla sat across from him, her eyes shining in the low lamplight. For a long moment, neither spoke. It was like time had folded into itself, 1967, 1973, 1976, all at once. The air was thick with everything they never said. Finally, Elvis looked up. "You know, I used to think that ring was a curse," he said. "Every time I looked at it, I saw what I lost." Priscilla tilted her head. "And now," he turned the ring over in his palm, "now I see what I was lucky enough to have, even if it didn't last." He smiled softly, but his eyes were wet. "I never stopped wearing it, you know? Just not here," he said, touching his chest. "Right here." The words caught her completely off guard. Her lips trembled, eyes filling. "Elvis!" He took her hand. His grip was weaker than she remembered, but warm. "If I could start over," he whispered, "I'd marry you twice, once for the world, and once just for us." Her breath caught. The man who once filled stadiums, who made millions scream his name, had never sounded smaller or more human. She tried to answer, but no words came. The tears she'd held back for years finally escaped, falling onto his hand, and onto the ring that had bound them together once before. He smiled faintly, thumb brushing away her tears. "Don't cry, Scylla. The world got enough sadness. We had our time." "But it wasn't enough," she whispered. He nodded. "No love ever is." For a few minutes, they just sat there, the sound of rain mixing with the faint hum of a gospel record spinning in the background. The music was old, scratched. "Peace in the Valley." Elvis leaned back in his chair, staring out the window. "You ever notice," he said quietly, "how the biggest crowds make you feel the loneliest?" She looked at him, really looked at him. The jumpsuits, the fame, the flashbulbs, all stripped away. What sat before her wasn't the king. It was just a man, tired and tender, trying to make peace with his ghosts. She reached across the table and covered his hand with both of hers. "You don't have to be alone anymore," she said. He smiled again, small and sad. "I've been alone for a long time, Scylla, but not tonight." The clock ticked softly in the background. Every second felt fragile, like glass. Neither of them knew this would be their last real conversation. But something in the air, the stillness, the finality, whispered that it was. After a while, Priscilla stood. She walked to the dresser and looked at the photo of their wedding day, the one he'd kept beside the ring. Her reflection shimmered faintly in the glass, merging with the woman in the photo. "Elvis," she said, turning back. "Thank you for letting me say goodbye this way." He didn't answer immediately. He just watched her, the woman who had once been his whole world. Then, as she reached for the doorknob, he spoke. "Scylla," he said softly. She turned. He smiled. "You'll always be my forever." Her eyes blurred. "And you'll always be my home." She left before the tears could drown her completely. The rain was heavier now, the night darker, but inside that house, for the first time in years, Elvis smiled. Because even broken love can end in peace. August 16th, 1977, Memphis. The morning sun had barely risen when the news spread across the radio. Elvis Presley dead at 42. Phones rang, fans screamed, and outside Graceland's gates, thousands gathered, crying as if they'd lost a member of their own family. Inside her Los Angeles home, Priscilla stood frozen, holding the phone to her ear. She didn't move, didn't breathe. The world had just gone silent. When she finally made it to Graceland later that day, the air felt heavy. Not just with sorrow, but with the weight of 1,000 memories. The house looked exactly as it did that afternoon the year before. The photo on the dresser, the half-full coffee cup by the window, and beside it, the ring she'd returned. She walked over, her hands shaking, and stared at it. The diamond still gleamed beneath a thin layer of dust. It looked like time had stopped the moment he'd let go of it. Mary Jenkins stood quietly in the doorway. "He never moved it," she whispered. Said it reminded him that love doesn't always leave. It just waits. Priscilla nodded, tears filling her eyes. He was right. In the days that followed, the ring became more than jewelry. It became a story, whispered among the staff, passed between fans, written in letters that poured in from all over the world. Some said it was cursed, others said it was sacred. But to Priscilla it was neither. It was proof. Proof that love, even imperfect, could leave something lasting behind. Years later, when Graceland opened its doors to the public in 1982, Priscilla made a quiet decision. She placed the ring in a glass display beside his gold records and photographs. No sign explained its history, no plaque told the story. But those who knew, the ones who'd followed their love, their heartbreak, their silence, understood. Still, fans asked questions. A woman named Janet from Chicago once left a handwritten note at the display case. It read, "Maybe love doesn't die. Maybe it just changes rooms." That line struck Priscilla so deeply that she had it engraved beneath the glass. Love never leaves. It just changes rooms. Every year, on the anniversary of his passing, fans gather at Graceland. Candles line the walkway. Songs play softly in the night. Some leave flowers. Others leave handwritten letters, folded carefully under the ring's display. And sometimes, when the crowd quiets, someone whispers, "She came back. He forgave her." Lisa Marie once asked her mother, "Why did you put the ring there?" Priscilla smiled gently. "Because it belongs to both of us, to him and me, but also to everyone who's ever loved and lost." Even now, decades later, that small piece of diamond still shines under the museum lights. To some, it's a symbol of heartbreak. To others, it's hope. But to Priscilla, it remains what it always was. A promise that somehow, in some quiet way, never really broke. Elvis's music still plays in the background for visitors walking through the hallways of Graceland. And sometimes, when the light hits just right, it feels like he's still there, smiling softly, watching over the life and love that once made him human. Because legends may fade, but love, real love, lingers. Decades later, the story of that ring still drifts through the gates of Graceland like a song that never quite ends. Visitors whisper it in line, guides lower their voices when they point toward the glass case. And somewhere, a child asks, "Did she really come back?" Priscilla's voice once answered that question in a quiet 1985 interview. She smiled gently, eyes downcast, and said, "We weren't perfect, but we were real." That single line echoed louder than any lyric he ever sang. The ring wasn't a fairy tale. It was a scar turned into a story. Proof that love can be broken and still beautiful. It wasn't about possession or marriage or headlines. It was about memory, about what stays when everything else fades. That same year, a fan from Texas named Michael left a small folded note near the ring's display. It read, "If he could start over, he'd marry her twice, once for the world and once for them." No one ever confirmed if Michael had read that line somewhere, or if he simply felt it. But Priscilla saw it and smiled. She knew those words weren't fiction. They were what Elvis had said to her in that room years ago. And that's what made the story live on. Not because it was grand, but because it was human. Elvis's legend was built on lights, music, and noise. But his heart, like anyone's, was built on moments of silence. The kind where love breathes even when people don't speak it. Fans who visit Graceland today often stop in front of that small plaque. They press their hands against the glass and whisper stories of their own heartbreaks. Some cry quietly, some smile through tears, because they all see themselves in that ring. A circle that breaks, bends, but somehow never truly ends. And that's the moral hidden beneath all the glitter and gold. Even the brightest stars have shadows. Even the loudest songs fade into quiet. But love, when it's real, never truly disappears. It just changes form. Sometimes into memory, sometimes into forgiveness, and sometimes into a simple ring resting under museum lights. In 2024, during an anniversary tribute, Priscilla was asked what she felt when she saw the ring again. She paused for a long time, then said, "Peace, because it's where it was always meant to be, between us, not on us." Her words hung in the air like the final note of a song. So, when visitors walk past that small glass case, they don't just see jewelry. They see a life, a love, a legacy. Two people who lived loud, hurt deeply, and somehow turned pain into something beautiful. Because the truest stories aren't about forever. They're about the moments that teach us how to let go. If you stand at Graceland late at night, long after the tours are over, you can still feel it. The hum of an old amplifier, the faint echo of laughter drifting down the halls, and the ghost of a love story that refuses to fade. The ring is still there, catching the light just as it did the day she gave it back. People lean close, whispering, "He never really let go. Did he?" Maybe that's the point. Some love stories aren't meant to be finished. Elvis used to say, "Love me tender, love me true," but he never said how to stop. And maybe he never did. Priscilla once told a fan, "Sometimes the hardest kind of love is the one that teaches you when to walk away and when to return." And that's what their story really is. Not a tragedy, not a legend, but a lesson. That you can lose someone and still love them. That you can forgive even if the world doesn't understand why. Because even after the spotlight fades, the songs end, and the applause dies down, what's left is what we gave to someone else. A word, a look, a ring. If you ever visit Graceland, stop in front of that glass case. Look past the diamond. Look at the reflection staring back at you. Ask yourself quietly, who would you forgive if you had one more chance? And if this story touched you, if it reminded you that love isn't about forever but about meaning, share it with someone who needs to remember that, too. Because legends may die, but love, true love, never does.